Alright, so today, instead of whatever I normally do, wanted to do something a little differently, a little, maybe a little lighter on the calorie count, simply because, I don't know, I don't need to justify myself. My wife and I watched Turbo. Not for the first time. We watched it a while back, and then we watched it again. Just because sometimes you just need a goofy, light, animated film that just kind of, whatever that is at the end of the day, right? You just kind of need that. And so we did, we watched it. And something else about me that maybe, I don't know if it's come up a whole lot, but worth mentioning maybe, is that I like racing. I like NASCAR especially, Formula One, Formula Drift, World Rally Championship. I mean, racing, the competition, the smell of the spent fuel, and all that stuff. Like, I love that stuff. So, a movie about an underdog racing and ended up like achieving his dreams. Like, that's kind of just in the pocket for me. So, watch that, and as we were watching it, like towards the last couple of minutes, in the conclusion of the film, I realized something about it, and it's kind of a fan theory maybe, is that Turbo was dead the whole time. So, and what I mean by that is, in the film, boring, like system labor life, industrial labor life, but he has a passion for and desires to be like a professional racer. He would put on the TV and he would like imagine himself, which, if we're totally honest, every kid has done that with football. Every kid that has done that with every kind of sport that they love, right? That like they've tried to imagine themselves in it, or they've tried to like reenact great plays in whatever they, or if they got little toy cars, they imagine. There's entire YouTube channels dedicated to that, right? So, I mean, like, relatable. Except I'm not a snail, but details, right? Well, anyways, then, like, they go through it. It's kind of boring at the beginning, and it's framed that way intentionally. It's supposed to feel dissatisfying and everything. Well, then there's this lawnmower scene, and in it, it has a near-death experience that causes him to reassess his life choices, how he doesn't want to do what he's been doing anymore, and that he's going to really pursue his lifelong dream of being a professional race car driver, essentially. A professional racer, right? He then comes across supporting character that is got a underground snail racing thing, and Samuel L. Jackson, and they encourage him to pursue his dreams even more. He then has a continue like soul searching. He gets sucked into the supercharger of a like an underground street racing car, and is exposed to nitrous or some other form of like performance chemical, and that transforms his biology so that he's able to be super fast. And then through the process of a inadvertent viral marketing campaign, gets a chance to race in the Indianapolis 500, and he wins, right? So that's kind of the sum of the narrative. The reason why I'm so sure he was dead that whole time is that everything seems like it's just anthropomorphized snail life up until the point where that lawnmower encounter occurs. As soon as that happens, everything happen. All the remaining points occur in a manner that is consistent with what you would imagine either a child or a snail would fantasize, even their own existence, their own biology, the way cars work, the way engines are assembled, the way racing, like moguls make decisions, and the way that sanctioning bodies rule on the outcome of races. Like all that is either the way a child or a fantastical like reimagining of how a failed competitor would imagine it would go. Because there's a couple of different theories about what happens when you die. There's the near-death experience, right? That or the death experience where your life flashes before your eyes and past events of significance then flash through as memories. And then there's the longing of how you wish things had been, married the other girl, or traveled the other road, pursued the other major in college, or like the unfulfilled wishes, right? That things that didn't happen that you wish had. And and then the third form is that all the things that you had happened to you or that you had been involved with, but you wish had not happened. What do I mean? Like regrets and losses, things like that. So those are the three forms. Most often when you see that trope is the good things in your life flashing before your eyes, childhood memories, big wins or whatever, and those things, and they kind of give you the sense of peace and you walk off into the light. However, if something happens where it's a regret, something that didn't happen that you wish had happened, it's usually to snap you back into like or that it's this thing of that your life was wasted and so forth, and then the hero like digs in deep, and then they go after, and that's what creates a new motivation for them to overcome the adversary. Yeah. And then on the third form is that it's the stuff that you wish had happened that did not happen, road not traveled, is basically that last little bit of hope and loss before you walk off into the light, right? So that's what I see has happened here with Turbo, is that from then on he is exposed to the nitrous oxide inside the engine, but for people that are kind of car nuts or that are racing nuts like me, is that I know how a supercharger works, and so he gets sucked into it, which is not unfathomable. Anyone that knows racing and stuff like that, sometimes they'll actually put screens across the front of those so that they don't suck like birds or large insects into there, because if it's large enough or it's significant, it can cause problems. Small flies and whatever doesn't really matter. It's just going to get incinerated immediately due to the high temperatures in there. And it gets sucked in, and then the next scene or the next shot is of him not just inside the cylinders, which is where he would have ended up. He's back in behind where the camshaft or the lifters and the intakes are. Like he got in behind there somehow without being incinerated by the combustion process of the engine. So how did that happen? I don't know. But for a child or someone like a snail, for instance, that doesn't have a capacity for understanding how engines work, wouldn't question it whatsoever. But then he's exposed to the nitrous oxide back behind there, which is behind the head gasket. And so if like your nitrous oxide is leaking back in behind where the connecting rods are, you're not going to benefit from any of the benefits of that the exposure to the gas, to the combustion process. It's not going to do anything. So either he wouldn't have been exposed to the nitrous oxide, or If he had been, he would have then immediately been incinerated. Like, he should be dead multiple times over this one shot sequence, but he doesn't. He survives it. And then it exposes him and it shows it like it infuses into his heart in a dramatic way, similar to how they do in like superhero movies and stuff. They show this deep, right? And even though, snails don't have anthropomorphized biology in that way, so that wouldn't have happened either. But if you're a snail that doesn't know anything about your body, or if you're a child that doesn't know anything about snail anatomy, not questioning it, right? So, it facilitates the narrative inside his mind, inside the fantasy, without causing alarm, right? It's not the kind of thing that would break a fantasy if that is something especially that you want to believe is occurring. Then getting invited to the Snail Avengers, right? And getting invited to participate in the Indianapolis 500, which would not happen. Even with viral marketing, what they have a press conference, the guy would have well, the thing is, doesn't have a racing license, right? Has never competed at even an amateur league, so no records or anything. His team is questionable, right? There's so many things about it that it's just like, this wouldn't work. But then he doesn't race in a vehicle, he races on foot. Snails technically do have a foot. On foot in it, which would also not be allowed. You have to compete according to the rules, the sanctioning body's rules. Like, you can't take a NASCAR to the Indianapolis 500. It wouldn't be competitive there anyway. You can't take an IMSA car to the Indianapolis 500 because it wouldn't qualify and it wouldn't compete there. You can't take a Formula One or a Formula Drift or a World Rally Championship car. You can't take those onto the Indianapolis. You can't enter them because of the fact that it wouldn't meet the sanctioning body requirements in order to be a competitor in the race. Now, there are other races that happen at Indianapolis, the Brickyard 400 and the Grand Prix and stuff, so you can compete on the track, just not in the Indianapolis 500 in that way. So, that's the thing, is that he wouldn't have passed either pre-race or post-race inspection, which if your car doesn't pass the post-race inspection, for instance, you can have your win taken away. That happened to, I believe it was Denny Hamlin this year in NASCAR. And it's happened in Formula One. It's happened in various instances where a car wins and dominates, but the way that they did, or the way that the flanges on the fenders, or there's any number of things, the cubic centimeters on the engine. Richard Petty has an encumbered victory because of the engine that he was running. There's a lot of stuff. And wins can be taken away on that, or they can become encumbered in that, yeah, you have the trophy, but you're not going to be allowed to have the points, or whatever. That stuff happens in real life. So even if they let him compete, his lack of a car will not pass any post-race inspection. So even if he wins, he's not going to keep it. He's also, if you're not registered with the sport from the beginning, you're not eligible for championships and stuff, which reduces the level of consequences that a sanctioning body can give you. So if you especially don't meet, like a road course ringer type situation, don't meet the production standard or the competition standards, you can be not only expelled, you can have the win taken away, but you also can be expelled on a lifetime or a season-wide or various other kinds of bans like that, or even banned from competing at any premier league altogether. So, Snail's not competing, basically, unless the snail wants to believe that it could. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is at the very end there's this crash, which is something else. Like, if you know the rules about how the way racing works, this doesn't work. But there's a crash, the entire raceway is blocked, and it's on the final lap, and it's just coming up to the last, like, the turbo is just inches away from being, like, meeting that point, the crossing the yard of bricks, right? And just kind of gives up, and then there's this emotional appeal again, and his racing team shows that they believe in him and everything, and as a result, he becomes encouraged and then crosses the line. But in the meantime, the villain, who's like the superstar of the Indy Racing League, comes up, and he would have won if not for the Snail that's super fast. But his car is demolished, and so he's trying to drag his own vehicle across the line, and he actually starts trying to step on the Snail in order to crush it to keep it from being able to. And here you have multiple, again, sanctioning issues. Is a accident like that happens on the final lap, most Premier Leagues will say the white flag waves, right? Final lap, whatever race or whatever flag waves after that ends the race. Red flag, yellow flag, checkered flag. Doesn't matter what it is. Most will do that. I don't know if that's the IRL's particular rules. I don't know that for certain, but NASCAR does it that way. Formula One has experimented with stuff along that lines. So simply, like, the race is probably over at that point. But even if it is not over, and that they were going to try to spin everything back up once the mess was cleaned up, and that they were going to do like a one to go again, even if they were going to do that, because of the complete blockage of the raceway due to the accident that had occurred, it would go into what is called a red flag scenario, in which all the cars are frozen exactly where they're at. Any cars that are capable of competition are frozen where they are, and then the track is littered. Any of the cars that has to be removed by equipment would be considered did not finish, DNF'd, right? Or they would be disqualified from completion of the race, which would include Superstar Guy, most of the probably first 10 cars, and Turbo. Because of his involvement, he would be at least frozen in place. So let's say he even is frozen first, he would still have to be removed from the track and then re-entered afterwards, which would cause him to be shuffled back into the pack. So, but during that red flag stage, everything is frozen. No cars can advance. You can't work on your car. Dale Earnhardt he actually washed his windshield, which is technically not maintenance, but Sterling Marlin got in trouble one time because he tried to pull his fender out from his tire during a red flag scenario. Other things have happened, but basically, the act of doing so, like, there's no way to advance position at that time. So even if bad guy, Superstar, could get his car started under its own power, move it across the line, wouldn't count, wouldn't mean anything. Additionally, if Turbo crosses the line at that point, doesn't matter. It just means that he would just shuffle back, right? Basically. So it means that that's not a winning scenario. It's not something that can win unless this is a fantasy. Unless this is a fantastical, impossible scenario that you want to believe would happen. Additionally, it's if you attempt to cause physical harm, life-altering physical harm, like let's say you not just simply like push somebody off the track, or you dump them, or you tap somebody on pit lane after a race to show your frustration with them, but actually like they're out of their car and you hit them with your car. That's not only is that that you can't do that sanction wise. Like you will lose points, they'll penalize you, they will fine you, you'll probably be expelled from the remaining of the season as far as scoring is concerned for things like that. People have had worse things than that happen to them for doing less than that, right? But there'd probably be criminal charges on that, because there have been instances where a person has filed criminal assault charges as a result of what happened during a kerfluffle before, during, or after a race. So that probably, like, Cagney, like, except for the fact that it's a snail, but there would be, like, and there would be multiple angles, high definition video evidence of him trying to literally murder another competitor, right? And even if he could, if your car can't cross the line under its own power, it's not scored. So him dragging his car, insufficient, wouldn't work. Would not be sufficient for him to score the victory anyway. So all those details combined, and I've spent way too much time talking about this, way too much time interested in it, and nobody cares about this kind of stuff for me, but this is what I'm saying. Turbo was dead the whole time, because all those things I've been talking about this whole 20-ish minutes boil down to, it's impossible. It's impossible unless you want to believe that it happened. And the only reason you would want to believe that this is the kind of thing that's occurring is if you have a stake in it. Like, it's the last dying breath hope that you wish could have happened but never had a chance to. And now you're going to vanish off into the aether, right? So that's what I'm saying. Turbo was dead the whole time. So childhood ruined if that's your favorite movie. If it's not your favorite movie, whatever. If you don't care, if you're just a racing nut like I am, I would love to hear some feedback, and whatever.